Hi guys, so this is going to be a quick instructional video on our next topic in our radical unit, which is now adding and subtracting radicals. What's nice about this lesson, guys, is that the idea of like terms and combining like terms is going to kind of be the main kind of skill that we're going to be using. So before we kind of get into some examples, you see how I have like terms with a question mark, and I give you guys 3 examples of whether or not these are like terms. So essentially, like terms in this case are going to be whether or not you have the same number under the radical. And when you do have the same number under the radical, that means you can combine them. And if you do not have the same number under the radical, you cannot combine them. So with radical 3 and radical 5, right, clearly 3 and 5 are not the same number, so these would not be like terms. I'm just going to write no here for now, okay? For 2 radical 2 and negative 4 radical 2, since that number under the radical 2 is the same for both terms, right, these technically would be like terms. So I'm just going to say yes. So I'm just saying yes or no of whether or not they are in fact like terms. We're not going to do any combining yet, okay? Then radical 3 and radical 27. Now, obviously, 3 and 27 are not the same number, but we know we can simplify radical 27 because a perfect square is a factor of 27, right? We know that I can break down radical 27 as radical 9 times radical 3, and then that would simplify to 3 radical 3. And now what do you know, right? I have the same number under my radical. I have radical 3 and radical 3. Therefore, yes, these would be considered like terms, and we'd be able to combine them. Okay. Now, how we actually go about combining them, so looking at my examples here, so for example, number 1, I have negative 10 radical 7 plus 12 radical 7. Now, I have the radical 7 and radical 7, so yes, those are like terms, and now all I'm going to do is combine the outside number, the coefficient, kind of. So I'd combine a negative 10 and a positive 12. That'd give me a positive 2, and then I just keep the number under the radical the same. So it'd be 2 radical 7 for my final answer. Okay, pretty simple. Now for number 2, I have 2 radical 6 minus 2 radical 24. Again, we know 6 and 24 are not the same number, but I can break down radical 24, and let's see what we're left over with. So if I break down radical 24, I can use 4 and 6. And that's going to leave me with 2 root 6. But since I have that coefficient of 2 out front, we know we're going to have to multiply the 2 and the 2. So this expression is going to simplify to 2 radical 6 minus 2 times 2 is 4, and then left over with that radical 6. So once again, yes, now I have my like terms, right? The radical 6 and radical 6. So combining my coefficients, I have a 2 minus a 4. 2 minus 4 is going to give me a negative 2. And then once again, I'm just going to keep that radical 6 as is. So my final answer would be negative 2 radical 6. Okay. Now for my last 2, they're a little bit longer expressions, but again, it's just that same idea of adding and subtracting. So going across here, I have negative 3 radical 18 plus 3 radical 8 minus 24, radical 24. So again, we know 18, 8, 24, not the same number, but we can simplify and break down all those numbers under the radical. So I'm going to kind of show all my work here. So I have negative 3. I can break down radical 18 using radical 9 and radical 2, plus 3. I can break down 8 using 4 and 2. And then minus radical 24, I'll use 4 and 6. So go ahead and simplify. I know the square root of 9 gives me a 3. So negative 3 times 3 is going to give me a negative 9 radical 2 plus the square root of 4 gives me a 2. So 3 times 2 is going to give me 6 radical 2 minus that radical 4 turns into a 2. So minus 2 root 6. So I have root 2, root 6. The only 2 terms I can combine are going to be the negative 9 radical 2 plus the 6 root 2. I cannot do anything with that 2 root 6 there because radical 6 is not a like term with the radical 2 and radical 2. So when I go ahead and combine these here, again, combining those coefficients, the negative 9 and the positive 6, that'll give me a negative 3 radical 2. And then I'm just going to keep minus 2 root 6. Since the radical 2 and the radical 6 are not like terms, I cannot combine them. So your answer in this case is actually going to be an expression and not just a single term. Okay? And that's going to be a little bit common in the next couple examples you'll get for your classwork. All right, and my last one, excuse me, I have negative 3 radical 2 plus 3 radical 20 minus 3 radical 8. Now I know the root 2 I can't simplify, so I'm just going to keep this as negative 3 root 2 plus 3. I can break down 20 using radical 4 and radical 5 because I know that radical 4 is a perfect square, minus 3, and for 8 I'm going to use 4 and 2 because once again we know the square root of 4 is a perfect square. Now go ahead and simplify. I have negative 3 radical 2. I'll keep that. Plus, that 4 is going to turn into a 2, right? Square root of 4 is 2. So 3 times 2 gives me the 6. So I have 6 root 5. Minus the square root of 4 gives me a 2. 3 times 2 gives me 6 root 2. So my only like terms here are going to be the first term, the negative 3 radical 2, and then the minus 6 radical 2. I can't combine it with the 6 root 5 because 5 is not a like term between the radical 2's. Okay? So combining a negative 3 and a negative 6, that'll give me a negative 9, and keep that root 2, and then just plus 6 radical 5.